Hey guys, in this video I'll be reacting to Cold Cases Solved in 2023. Let's see what this video is about. Let's go.
It's no secret that in the last few years, there has been an explosion in the number of cold cases that have been solved both across the United States and around the world. A lot of this can be attributed to advancements in DNA technology, like forensic genetic genealogy, which in 2018 famously led to the arrest of the notorious Golden State Killer. However, many times it's simply due to good old-fashioned police work and the dedication of countless law enforcement personnel, families of victims, and members of the public who never stopped searching for answers. Whatever the reason. If you ask us, there's nothing more satisfying or fascinating than when a cold case like this is finally solved. That's why today, as we approach the tail end of 2023, we thought it would be interesting to look back and cover a few of the crimes that were solved this year. Just a heads up, we've opted to focus more on lesser known cases for this video. While stories like the arrest of the Long Island serial killer certainly made massive headlines in 2023, and for good reason, we wanted to shine a spotlight on some of the cases that you might not have come across. If you'd like us to dig into some of these more well-known stories, let us know in the comments below, and we can absolutely do that in a future video. With that out of the way, here are 3 cold cases that were solved in 2023. Just before 1:30 in the morning on July 20th, 1971, a young woman named Beverly
And that's what I was thinking the whole time. I really want to know how many years it took.
Landfer got up to grab something from the bedroom of her apartment in the city of Burlington, Vermont. The 24-year-old had spent the night hanging out with one of her roommates, 19-year-old Carrie Duane, as well as Carrie's boyfriend, 23-year-old Paul Robinson. The group had gone to a local restaurant for some food and a few drinks before heading back to Beverly and Carrie's place. It was a 3-story house on Brooks Avenue that had been split into several separate units. The women rented the ground floor, a spacious 2-bedroom, which they shared with a third roommate, 23-year-old Rita Curran. After arriving home at about midnight, the friends had settled into the living room to talk for a bit before calling it a night. When they got there, they noticed that the door to one of the bedrooms was slightly open, though they didn't think much of this because Rita had been asleep inside when they left. However, when Beverly got up to grab something from the room about an hour later and she pushed against the door, she noticed there was something blocking her way. To her horror, she realized that it was Rita's body.
Oh nah.
Rita was
That's crazy. Imagine you're in the house, you're thinking everything's cool, everyone's safe, and then you come home and find somebody unalive. That's crazy.
back, face up on the floor, directly beyond the doorway. She was semi-nude, with the housecoat and pajamas she had been wearing ripped open in the front. Her arms and legs were outstretched, with one of her legs tangled in her bedspread, which was also partially pinned underneath her. Her purse, which contained her cash and her ID, was also on the floor beside her. The 23-year-old was cold to the touch. When police were called to the scene, it was immediately obvious to them that Rita had been the victim of a brutal attack.
Yeah, and it's sad.
Though her cause of death would later be determined to be strangulation, she had also been badly beaten in the head and face and had been sexually assaulted. Tragically, it was also clear that she had fought hard for her life. After conducting a thorough search of the apartment, detectives concluded that whoever was responsible for the disturbing crime could have easily gotten in through either the front or back door. Both of these had been left unlocked by Rita's
Why? By your friends? Don't tell me. Or her roommates.
roommates when they went out.
You've got to be kidding me. Listen, you guys better lock your doors because even if you're just gonna go inside to grab something small, doesn't matter. Lock it. Lock it. You never know who's watching. You never know. You feel what I'm saying? This is a crazy world we live in. People be sick in the head.
That night, since the 3 of them shared one key, it was just easier to make sure no one got locked out this way. There was a bit of blood found on the back door, suggesting this
But I mean, don't they have each other's number or something? So she can call and be like, hey, I'm here or something. That's dangerous. Leaving the door windows unlocked is dangerous.
This might have been the way that the killer left. All other potential entrances and exits were locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. In terms of additional evidence at the scene, there wasn't much. The exception was a cigarette butt found near Rita's body, which was collected by investigators. From here, detectives turned their attention to learning as much as they could about Rita Curran, as well as questioning anyone who might be of interest. They started with the roommates who had found her. Beverly and Carrie said that they had last seen Rita at 11:20 p.m. that night when they headed out for food and drinks. Prior to that, Rita had returned home to the apartment at around 10 when she got back from practicing with her women's singing group, the Champlain Echoes. Not long after getting in, Rita said she was tired and she was going to bed. That's why no one thought it was weird when they got back from the restaurant and found the apartment quiet. Detectives learned that Rita had only moved into the Brooks Avenue apartment about a month earlier. For her entire life up until that point, the 23-year-old had lived with her parents, even when she attended Trinity College. After graduating, Rita had become an elementary school teacher. For the last few years, she had taught second grade at a local school near the family home in the community of Milton. In the summers, she worked as a maid at a motel called the Colonial Motor Inn. She was well liked at both jobs, particularly by her young students. People knew Rita as quiet and sometimes self conscious, but very kind and giving. She came from
You know, listen, if you're a parent, you're probably gonna feel horrible if something like this happened to your child. A month after? Nah, nah. And the crazy thing to me is either the person who did this, either he was stalking them, or he was just going around trying to see which house is open. Mm-mm.
a devout Catholic family and was a hard worker, taking graduate classes and teaching religion on top of her other jobs. Rita had decided to move in part because she was looking to start the next phase of her life. She wanted to get married and start a family, and she felt like she had a better chance of meeting men her age if she moved to the city. From speaking with Rita's family, authorities learned that so far, things hadn't been what Rita hoped. She didn't feel like she had much in common with her roommates and was thinking about moving home. Still, no one had seen a tragedy like this coming. Any murder was big news in Burlington at the time, but one this brutal was virtually unheard of. As news of the killing started to spread, it was accompanied by a wave of panic. People ran out to buy locks for their doors for the first time, and there was fear that it was only a matter of time before a similar crime would be committed. It didn't help that as this was happening, it was becoming clearer and clearer that police were no closer to finding Rita's killer. Authorities interviewed countless people, including all of the 23-year-old's neighbors, men she had dated, and really anyone she might have come in contact with in the hours leading up to her death. However, none of this led to a break in the case, and eventually, it went cold. Now, this isn't to say that police didn't have their theories. According to reports, at one point, there were at least 13 possible suspects that they were considering. The most noteworthy of these was infamous serial killer Ted Bundy.
Oh,
By the time Bundy was
nah.
caught, the Rita Curran case was already several years old. However, after noticing similarities between these victims and the way that Rita was murdered, a detective eventually floated the idea that the serial killer could be involved. In addition to this, Bundy was born just half a mile away from the motel where Rita worked. Authorities tried to find evidence that he had been in the area at the time, but nothing definitive was ever proven. It appears that the most promising thing that ever emerged was a dog catcher's report from the same week of Rita's murder that said that someone named Bundy had been bitten. Rita's family members wrote to Ted Bundy while he was awaiting execution. However, he said he wouldn't confirm or deny whether he was responsible. As far as we can tell,
These people, they weird. I mean, you're gonna die either way, so you might as well just say it, right? Mm-mm.
the Ted Bundy theory actually remained a prominent theory of the case until as recently as 2021. However, this was mostly as it related to the public perception of the investigation. In the background, authorities were quietly exploring other alternatives. In 2014, the Burlington Police Department reopened Rita's case. It turned out that the cigarette butt that the original investigators had collected from the crime scene all the way back in 1971 had been well preserved, and there were hopes that DNA analysis that wasn't possible back then might hold the key to uncovering the killer. A profile was successfully extracted from the evidence and was submitted to the CODIS database. The DNA was also tested against all 13 of those potential suspects I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, though, neither of these tactics produced any kind of a match. For the next 5 years, little else happened until 2019 when the case was reopened again. However, this time, instead of having a single detective assigned to it, a whole team was brought in to essentially start from the beginning. One
Great.
of the things they wanted to try was forensic genetic genealogy. Now, I won't go on about this too long because I think most of you are pretty familiar with what this is by now, but just in case you haven't heard of it before, the technique basically works like this. DNA profiling and testing is used in combination with traditional genealogy techniques, in particular by making use of existing public databases of DNA. Essentially, experts can use databases like GEDmatch and similar services to take an unknown DNA sample and find connections to people in their family tree. Once they've established these connections, they can narrow down and search through family relationships, ultimately figuring out a person's identity. With the help of a company called Parabon Nanolabs, detectives were able to do this with the cigarette butt DNA. When they did, the results pointed to a single man. His name was William DeRuse. This was a name that authorities actually
Child.
recognized. You see, William was one of Rita's neighbors. Back in 1971, he and his wife Michelle lived in the same building as Rita and her roommates. Their apartment was on the
Is she serious?
top floor of the three-story residence. They had both been questioned at the time of the crime. However, Michelle had provided William with an alibi, saying that they had been together in their unit during the entire period before and after the murder. Following the DNA match, investigators were able to track Michelle down. She and William had long since divorced, and she had moved to Eugene, Oregon. During this new conversation, Michelle explained that the alibi she provided had been a lie. She said that actually, on the night of July 19th, she and William had gotten into a huge argument. He had stormed out, saying that he needed time to cool off. After the murder, William told Michelle that he needed her to say that he had been home all night. He claimed that he wasn't involved, but said that since he had a criminal record, the investigation would be unfairly targeted at him unless he had an alibi. Michelle said that she believed what William told her. At the time, they were young and in love, and had only been married for 2 weeks. Not long after Rita's murder, Michelle and William left the state. William had eventually gone to Thailand alone, becoming a Buddhist monk. Other women
Nah.
that police interviewed who had been with William said that they definitely saw the dark side of him. One woman who he had married after Michelle said that he was prone to sudden violent outbursts. She said on one occasion William had stabbed a female friend completely unprompted. On another occasion, he had choked her. If there were
Listen, this whole case is crazy. So he was living in the same apartment as them, or in the same complex as them, or in the same house as them, whatever. And nobody thought of him. And the girl that lied about his alibi, I'm trying to think, I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt because, I mean, she was married to him. But didn't she have suspicion? I mean, you know what it is? Let me say it like this. If she had suspicion that he might have done it and she didn't say nothing, even after they broke up, then she evil.
any remaining doubts about William DeRuse's responsibility for Rita's murder, those were put to bed when authorities found even more DNA matches from him to evidence at the 1971 crime scene. This included DNA found on
And I hope he's alive. I hope he is alive because it's been years at this point.
Rita's torn house coat. Frustratingly, William DeRuse can no longer be held legally accountable for his crimes. He died of a drug overdose in San Francisco in 1986 at the age of 46. Despite the bittersweet ending to Rita Curran's case, police and her surviving family members said at a press conference a few months ago that they were happy to finally receive answers after all these years. In an interview, her brother Tom stated, quote, "My mother came here from Ireland and my father from Newfoundland. We were an old-fashioned, strong Catholic family. I don't think so much about the guy who did this as I do about Rita and my parents and what they went through. I pray for my parents and I pray for Rita."
That story was very sad, and the fact that he passed away, so that you cannot really hold nobody accountable, but at least the case was solved.
August 27th, 1979, started off like any other day for 28-year-old Vicki Lynn Belk and her boyfriend James Hill. It was a Monday morning, the start of a new work week, and after getting up and having breakfast, the pair left their apartment in the community of Suitland, Maryland. They were headed to the Department of Agriculture offices where they were both employed. Like most mornings, the couple began their journey in James's 1972 Buick, driving it part of the way into Washington, D.C. They stopped at Stadium Armory Station, preferring to leave the car and take the metro system for the last leg of the trip. Before parting ways that morning, Vicki reminded James that she was going to run some errands at lunch. Her plan was to take the subway back to the car, then she would meet James in the parking lot when he finished for the day as well. James thought nothing of this, saying that the plan sounded good and that he would see her later. However, when James finished work that afternoon, he couldn't see Vicki or his car anywhere in the parking lot. He ended up finding another way home, thinking that maybe she was back at their apartment. But upon arriving, she wasn't there either. He spent the night calling every friend and family member of Vicki's he could think of, asking them if they had any idea where she had gone. Unnervingly, none of them had seen or heard from her. James didn't know it then, but in reality, Vicki had never even returned from lunch that day. By the following morning, James was worried enough that he called the Prince George's County Police. He said that he hadn't seen his girlfriend for close to 24 hours, and that he was now incredibly concerned for her safety. A sudden disappearance like this was completely out of character for Vicki. She was an incredibly accomplished and reliable person. It wasn't like Vicki to run out on her responsibilities that included caring for her 7-year-old son, Lamont. Vicki was the eldest of 6 children and had worked hard to get where she was in life. A child of the civil rights movement, she had been part of the very first group of students to integrate the school system in Alexandria, Virginia. She had gone on to earn a Bachelor of Arts in Education from St. Augustine's University in North Carolina before getting her job as a management analyst with the Department of Agriculture. She was devoutly religious and was deeply involved in the Oakland Baptist Church in Alexandria. Before an investigation into Vicki's disappearance could even really get off the ground, though, Prince George's County Police received some disturbing news. Just one day after James reported Vicki missing, the body of a woman had been found in neighboring Charles County. The gruesome discovery was made by a teenage boy who was riding his bike along Metropolitan Church Road in the
Hold on, off topic. Do you guys know also what I think about? I think about the people that be coming across these bodies. That must be disturbing. Imagine you just go about your day and seeing skeletons, or not even skeletons, seeing somebody just on a life down there, somebody dead on the ground. That's traumatizing.
community of Bryan's Road. After arriving at the scene, authorities confirmed everyone's worst fears. These were the remains of Vicki Lynn Belk. Vicki's body was found in a wooded area about 20 feet from the roadway. She was lying on her back with her legs extended and her fists clenched and held up near her collarbone, as if she were struggling to fend off an attacker. She had died from a gunshot wound to the head. Disturbingly, that wasn't all, though. Further investigation by the medical examiner also revealed that Vicki had been the victim of a sexual assault. Understandably, the idea that Vicky's life could have been ended in such a brutal way came as a devastating blow to her friends and family members. Not only that, but her young son would now have to grow up without his mother.
Yes,
The
sir.
timing was also particularly hard for Vicky's younger sister, Judy. Just 2 weeks earlier, Vicky had been the maid of honor at her wedding. It was the last time she had seen her. Growing up, Vicky had always been her protector. When they faced the possibility of hostility and violence as kids during integration, Vicky was right beside her, holding her hand and reassuring her that everything was going to be okay. Sadly, things were only about to get harder for Vicky's loved ones, as it soon became clear that the investigation into her murder was going to be a difficult one. There were no real witnesses or obvious clues, and not much changed even after James's Buick turned up abandoned in DC. Other avenues of
I mean, listen, if she was assaulted, can you not, do some? I mean, yeah, but at that time there were probably no DNA, or I don't know. Technology is not how it is right now. They didn't have the equipment or the things that you needed to actually figure things out the right way, like they do now. But sheesh.
investigation were extremely limited or non existent given the time period. To put this in perspective, in 1979, it would still be 7 years before even the most rudimentary DNA techniques would be used in forensics. With little for authorities to
Mm-mm.
go on, the case eventually went cold. When DNA testing did become available in the early 2000s, evidence taken from the 1979 crime scene was sent off for testing. Of particular interest to detectives were the dress and slip Vicky had been wearing at the time of her murder. Thankfully, these articles of clothing had been well preserved. Semen believed to belong to the perpetrator was found, but unfortunately, authorities were only able to obtain a partial profile. It wasn't enough to submit to the CODIS database, and likely wouldn't even have been possible to do a direct comparison with. As a side note, I feel like this is a subject that probably isn't talked about enough. Maybe it's just me, but growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, it always felt like there was this bright line between pre DNA and post DNA forensics. And while this is definitely true in some respects, the more I've read about these kinds of stories, the more I've gained an appreciation for just how far we've come in the last couple of decades. Really, even in like the
Yeah,
last 5 to 10 years. Because the stuff we can do today honestly blows the early DNA technology out of the water. The sensitivity
it
and
does.
accuracy of these newer tests are actually pretty mind boggling. And I think that this case,
And I'm happy the technology and all that is, better right now. Because now you can solve stuff quicker. Because to wait 20 years, to wait 30 years, to wait even more, it's a lot. It is a lot. And probably when it's time to convict the person or to put the person behind bars, it's too late because they are not here anymore, like the last one.
is an excellent example. Because when the evidence from Vicky's murder was re examined with these tools in 2022, it was a completely different situation. This time around, investigators were easily able to obtain a male DNA profile from both her dress and her slip. This evidence was submitted to CODIS, leading to some more good news for detectives. After nearly 44 years, they finally had the name of a suspect, Andre Taylor. When authorities looked up Andre
Mm-mm.
earlier this year, they discovered that he was 62 and in bad health. He was a resident at a DC nursing and rehabilitation facility and had previously lost one of his legs. However, back in 1979, Andre was 18 years old. He also lived less than 4 miles from where Vicky's body was discovered. Andre had a long criminal history, mostly for nonviolent crimes. However, he had been in and out of prison throughout his adult life, and his longest stint had been for something alarming. In 1989, he had been charged for allegedly shooting and killing a man during a robbery. He wasn't found guilty of murder in that case, though he did receive a sentence of 5 to 15 years on a weapons violation. After tracking Andre down, authorities arrested and charged him with Vicky's murder. At the time of this recording, it appears he is currently awaiting trial. As for Vicky's family, they were relieved and happy to finally have answers after all these years.
Yeah. And it's crazy, he was 18. That is so young. Like, boy, you had your whole life in front of you for you to be out here doing these things. I mean, he wasn't caught until he was 63, but still, I'm happy that he caught him and I'm happy that he's still alive. That everybody can see him for who he truly is. Unbelievable.
In a statement to the media, her now 51-year-old son Lamont said, quote, I just thank God for allowing us to be alive to bear witness to this momentous occasion. Our community is a little bit safer today with this person behind bars.
Hmm.
While it took more than 4 decades to solve Vicky's murder, her legacy has long since been kept alive by members of her family through an organization they created called the Vicky Belk Scholarship Foundation. The organization provides scholarships to graduating seniors at the church that Vicky formerly attended and has currently helped over 100 people.
That's great. I'm happy that he caught the man. And I'm happy that he's alive. The last one, he wasn't alive, whatever. The first one, I mean, he wasn't alive, whatever. I really wanted him to be alive so he can really go behind bars. You know, but this one, I don't care that you don't have his legs. That's karma for you. And there's more to come since he probably, I don't know if they will send him to jail because he is older and he's not in good health. So I don't know if they will send him to prison or to jail, but I hope they do. I really hope they do, honestly.
On the morning of August 15th, 1975, an 8-year-old girl named Gretchen Harrington left her home in Marple Township, Pennsylvania. It was a little after 9 a.m., and she was headed to her summer vacation Bible school class. Though this was a journey that Gretchen made every weekday, on this particular morning the trip was a little different. It was the first time that she would be walking there without her two older sisters, Zoe and Anne. The two girls were extremely excited because there had just been a new addition to the family, their baby sister, Jessica, and they wanted to stay behind for a bit to greet their mom and the newborn as they returned home from the hospital. As a result, Gretchen was allowed to go alone by her father, Harold. Besides, he figured, she would be back fairly soon. The Vacation Bible School program the girls attended was jointly run between the Trinity Christian Reformed Church and the Broomall Reformed Presbyterian Church. The two buildings were less than half a mile apart, and Harold was actually the pastor of Broomall. As a result, the church was right next to the Harrington home. Like every morning, Bible school started at Trinity around 9:30 a.m. Kids would meet there for a bit before half of them would be transported to Broomall. Gretchen was among the group of children that would come back to the church right next to her house. However, when Zoe went over to Broomall around 11 a.m., she couldn't see her sister. Everyone, including Gretchen's best friend, were all lined up outside, but Gretchen was nowhere to be found. When Zoe asked Gretchen's teacher where she was, she said that she had no idea. She thought she was sick because she had never shown up at Trinity that morning. This alarming fact was
That must be horrible to hear. I'm sure nobody want to hear that. You think your sister, your child, your parents, they fine. They reach the destination and we get there, they're like, we never saw this person.
confirmed when Harold got on the phone with the pastor at Trinity, David Zanstra. David was someone the family knew well and was also the father of Gretchen's best friend. He said that he hadn't seen her at all that morning and told Harold that he would call the police. Though there were hopes that there was a reasonable explanation for the 8-year-old's sudden disappearance, this became increasingly hard to believe as hours began to pass with no sign of her.
And also 8 year old, she was very young. My parents at 8 years, they didn't even let me get outside the gate. They were like, girl, you ain't going nowhere. I was allowed to go walk on the street, not to do none of that. But I guess these were different times. I guess. But still, a child walking on the road alone, I don't care how early it is, that no, that can't run. That cannot run. Because people, every small opportunities, every little opportunity they see to abuse a situation, they will do it. Because you gotta remember, there's a lot of people that is sick in the head. You never know who is sick or who is not.
By nightfall, an investigation was in full swing, and the community was on high alert. The following morning, hundreds of volunteers came out to help support police. They focused their efforts on any place immediately along Gretchen's route to Trinity Church. Even though the walk was just a straight shot up a hill, there were a number of dense forested areas on either side of the roadway. Helicopters were brought in to assist, as well as police canines. Much to everyone's frustration, not a scrap of evidence was found indicating where Gretchen might be. The closest thing authorities had to a clue was far from comforting. The last witnesses who thought that they had seen Gretchen on her walk the previous day said that she might have been talking to someone in a vehicle. This was all the more alarming because police
Mm-mm.
canines had lost Gretchen's scent halfway up the hill to Trinity Church. It was seeming more and more like she had been abducted.
Yeah.
After 2 days with virtually no progress made, the massive search effort for Gretchen was called off. The investigation continued, but still, authorities had little to go on. Volunteers did what they could to help the Harrington family by passing out flyers and continuing to look around on their own. However, as days turned to weeks, a palpable sense of dread spread across the community. On October 14th, nearly 2 months to the day that Gretchen had gone missing, police received a call that everyone had feared. A man who was jogging in Ridley Creek State Park had come across what he thought were human remains. When authorities arrived in
Mm-mm.
the area, which was located about 7 miles away from where Gretchen had gone missing, they were met with a grisly scene. These were indeed the skeletonized remains of a child. The body had been partially covered with sticks and leaves, and nearby was some neatly folded clothing. Among the items were a blue and white striped blouse. Gretchen's mother, Ina, immediately recognized it because she was the one that had made it for her daughter. The final heartbreaking confirmation was made a couple of days later using dental records. These were the remains of Gretchen Harrington. Despite the condition of the body, the medical examiner was able to determine a likely cause of death. She had sustained skull fractures, likely from multiple blows to the head. Though the news of
She's an 8-year old. Why would you wanna hit somebody, an 8-year old in the head? They probably cannot defend themselves. This is some psychotic stuff. Mm-mm.
Gretchen's murder generated a wave of new tips and leads, all of which were followed up on by detectives. Unfortunately, none of these panned out. Eventually, the case went cold. Understandably, Gretchen's murder had a devastating impact on the Harrington family. However, it also left a lasting mark on the broader community. Many parents saw their own children in Gretchen and now feared for their safety. Those who grew up at the time would later recall in interviews that the murder was something of a dividing line in their childhoods. Before it, things felt safe and carefree. They were allowed to go and play wherever they wanted. Afterwards, many were never allowed to walk anywhere alone again. As years passed, Gretchen's case was reopened and re examined many times, though it's unclear how much, if any, progress was made. That was until January of this year, when the Pennsylvania State Police received a call out of the blue from a woman. That woman's name has not been released for reasons that will become obvious in a moment, though court records have identified her by the initials SF. The information she shared with investigators was truly horrifying. SF said that she had been holding on to trauma for decades. That trauma had started all the way back in 1975, when she was a young girl growing up in Havertown, a community located just 3 miles east of Marple Township. SF explained that when she was 10 years old, she was sleeping over at a friend's house when she awoke during the middle of the night to a situation she didn't understand. Her friend's father was touching her, and he quickly left the room once he realized she was waking up. The next night, the same thing happened again, prompting her to tell her parents when she returned home.
She did great. Guys, teach your kids, no? Tell your stuff. Teach them to tell you guys if somebody's touching them, if somebody's doing something.
After she did, She was never allowed to stay at that friend's house again. SF told police that after thinking about it for years, she had now become convinced that this same friend's dad might have been involved in the murder of Gretchen Harrington. She believed this because she was pretty sure he had also tried to abduct another friend of hers around the same time, named
No.
Holly. To back up what she was saying, SF showed authorities diaries she had kept during this period. The most chilling of these entries read, quote, "Guess what? A man tried to kidnap Holly twice. It's a secret, so I can't tell anyone. But I think he might."
Secret? How is the secret? Did Holly tell her parents? You know what? Let me keep playing.
Be the one who kidnapped Gretchen. I think it was Mr. Z. In case you haven't already figured it out, Mr. Z was David Zanstra, the pastor of Trinity Church, and the very person who had.
And do you know what? When they see something about the pastor, my mind automatically went to, okay, maybe it was him, because these pastors they be twisted. These pastors out here they be twisted. They be out here preaching the word of God, but they be doing some devilish stuff. Some devilish stuff. And also I remember when the sister went to take her, so to pick her up, and they talked with somebody, right? I heard it was a female. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. When they say they call the pastor, I was like, I didn't trust it, but I didn't say nothing because I didn't want to assume, and I didn't want to say stuff that isn't like that, but I did tell it about it.
Would first called authorities to report Gretchen Harrington missing.
Mm-mm.
When authorities tracked David down this year, he was now 83 years old and living in Marietta, Georgia. According to reports, it didn't.
Man, he looked that in the face, sorry, but he looked like they better put him in jail. They better. I don't care how old he is.
Take long for him to confess to the sexual assaults SF had told them about. Pretty soon, he had also confessed to the murder of Gretchen Harrington. David told authorities that on the day of the disappearance, he had offered Gretchen a ride after seeing her walking alone. Because he was a trusted family friend, she got into his vehicle. When she
Unbelievable.
realized he wasn't driving her to the church, Gretchen asked to be taken home. Instead, David allegedly drove her to a secluded area of Ridley Creek State Park. Once there, he demanded she take off her clothes. When Gretchen said no and tried to fight back, David beat her to death. Though David has since tried to walk his statements back, saying that he was tricked into giving a confession, Pennsylvania State Police say that they believe that after nearly 48 years, they have finally found the right man. Some sources we came across also brought up another potential piece of evidence pointing to David's guilt. Back when he was interviewed in 1975, he was apparently able to give authorities an accurate description of what Gretchen had been wearing on the day of her disappearance.
And nobody thought that was suspicious? The minute he said that?
This was despite the fact that, if you recall, he had always maintained that he never saw her that day. Disturbingly,
Don't make no
it appears
sense.
that this case may still be far from over. You see, after David's arrest was made public, authorities began receiving accusations from people across the United States alleging that he had assaulted them as children as well.
Oh.
Investigators say that David moved many times while working as a pastor, and there may be countless other victims. While the statute of limitations.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's other victims. Because it was Holly. There was Holly. There was the girl that called the police. They say that she's still traumatized about this whole thing. And the girl that the story is about. And also, I'm sure there are other kids also. And his daughter, his own daughter. God knows what he was doing with her too. He's a creep.
On many of these cases has frustratingly run out. Police say that they are still investigating all of these claims and are also looking into other crimes which David might be responsible for. One of these is the case of a 4-year-old California girl named Amanda Nicole Nikki Campbell, who was last seen riding her bike to a friend's house in 1991. At the time of this recording, David Zanstra is facing multiple charges in connection with Gretchen Harrington's death, including first-degree murder. He remains in custody without bail. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to
Disgusting. You better rot in prison. I don't care what nobody say. I don't care how old he is. I don't care if he's sick. I do not care. I do not care because he didn't care about none of the children that he touched. He didn't care about none of the girls that he assaulted. So I don't care about them. So yes guys, this was the video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.